Good afternoon. Are you guys awake? Is your lunch settled? Well, welcome to our session. I'm Kirsten Rose. I'm the technology administrator. Actually, last month I have a new title, technology and assessment administrator, because that's a lot what we do in our district, right? From the Cedarburg School District. And we're going to talk today about blending our one-to-one initiative, goals and vision with the SAMR model. Rachel Yerk and Tammy Stevens, Dr. Tammy Stevens, are with me, and we're going to just share a little bit. Hopefully at the end we'll have some time for questions if you have any. So our presentation URL is there if you want to follow along. So with that, we're going to start and tell you a little bit about our district. So Cedarburg is a small town, a North Shore suburb of Milwaukee, and we have about 3,000 students, 5 schools. It's a pretty affluent area, but we have our pockets of need also, like most schools. And we have 2 title schools, some free and reduced lunch, 9% or so. But one point of pride for us is we have 2 blue ribbon schools, one being our high school this year, one of the only high school in Wisconsin named as a blue ribbon school. So I have to give a shout out to our high school people. So. The other thing about our district that I wanted to share is kind of where we've been and who we are in terms of our technology landscape. And I came into this position in the fall, or actually summer of 2012, and we had 10 iPads in each district, or in each school, elementary school. That was our mobile devices. Our teachers didn't have laptops, we had desktops. We had traditional computer labs, and we had 2 grant-funded carts of Chromebooks at our high school and middle school. So not a heck of a lot kind of going on in terms of our mobile learning environment. And we had just become a Google Apps for Education district. We were, and I put quotes, a BYO district. We had infrastructure, Wi-Fi, throughout our whole district. But the next item on my bullet there is we had no public Wi-Fi. So how's that work for you for BYOD? So soon after we did have public Wi-Fi. Then in fall of 2013, things changed. We had a new superintendent. July 1, he said, "Tell me about mobile devices here." So that was the beginning of our conversation. That brought us to where we are today in our district in the fall of 2014. And you can see we have quite a change that happened since the fall of 2014. And we're going to bring you through that path and talk a little bit about that. One of my points throughout here is going to be that very last bullet over there that says we added an instructional technology administrator. And so now I kind of have a partner in crime, and that's Rachel. So very excited in having, like I said, a partner in crime. So we're very privileged and happy that along the way we were able to bring on board consultants to work with us, and I'm going to introduce my friend Tammy Stevens. Dr. Tammy Stevens is the Chief Learning Officer for eClass for Learning, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about our journey.
Great. Thanks, Kirsten. It's a real privilege to be able to speak with clients, and I really am honored that they asked me to do this. We put our presentation, just to kind of tell you where it's headed, in 3 parts, and mine is probably the smallest part. I'll talk a little bit about the planning and research that went behind the planning of the initiative. Then we're going to get into the evaluation and protocols that Kirsten will come up and speak about. And then we're going to talk about what it looks like on the ground. And one of the things that I'm very, very excited about this presentation is both presenters from Cedarburg are very transparent in this presentation. And usually, a lot of times when districts present at something like this, they like to show all the things that are working well. And they're also going to talk about some of the barriers they had, some of the challenges, how they overcame those, some that are still ongoing, and how they're thinking about addressing those. And I think sometimes that makes the most interesting presentations. So that takes a lot of courage, too. So thanks for doing that. When I first start consulting with a district on one-to-one, that was what my dissertation was on. I observed 18 schools that were implementing one-to-one over 4 years. I learned a lot, and now I work nationally with school districts that are implementing. And I like to get a lay of the land, and I have a lot of research-based questions that I ask, and I want to know about their mission and vision. I want to know about their curriculum and assessment practices and how that fits with their mission and vision for the program. I want to know what they're thinking about professional development, which will be a big part of this presentation. What are they thinking about hardware, infrastructure, the learning architecture, the pieces that will support the learning, the policies, the procedures, and have they budgeted adequately? So that was step one with the school district, and things were in really good shape when I came on board, very, very good shape. I only had 2 recommendations for them, and I was very pleased that the district chose to act on both of them. The first one is really exciting. I really felt that they needed a technology integration specialist. And I know that staffing is hard in these tough budgeting times, and they're not a huge district, but all the research and the things that I had seen in their district, they needed that position. So they did hire Rachel Yerk, a great choice. She's going to come up and talk about what it's looking like on the ground as the person who works with the teachers in real time every day. And I think that's what maybe the most valuable part of this. So that was recommendation 1 that I saw as something they needed to address. And then the second one is very, very true of most districts implementing one-to-one, is they needed to have ways to evaluate the program and help drive it. This morning at the keynote, there was talk about iterative design process, that things need to be adjusted and looked at. And I really am a proponent that you need data to do that, and we'll be spending a lot of time talking about that. And I guess my next slides, I don't have too many, are kind of the importance of that and to get you on board with that idea. If you are at the beginning of a one-to-one or you're thinking about it, really think about including evaluation in your one-to-one. If you haven't defined where you're going, how will you know when you get there? So many of the initiatives, I'm often called in when there are problems. And the devices were purchased, the infrastructure is there, but things aren't working. And a lot of times it was because there was no mission or vision around teaching and learning for those devices. That's really, really important that the whole organization has a common language and it has a common vision of where they're heading and why the devices are being added into the learning environment. Okay. In my doctorate, we did a lot of leadership. I really like Drucker. He says, often in change initiatives, organizations fail because they focus their efforts on efforts instead of results. And I see that over and over and over as I work across the country. We're all about getting the devices, making sure that our hotspots are good, making sure that we're doing professional development, but is it impacting learning? Are we getting to our initial, what we thought would change as a result of implementing this? And oftentimes we get so busy, one-to-one is very chaotic in year 1. There's a lot that needs to be done that we forget, are we getting the results that we need to come back to our board and our community later on? And that's another common problem. I'm often called in at year 3 when they want to refresh the program, and the board is saying, well, what results do you have? How do we know this is working? This is very expensive. And at first, everybody's excited, but then and we'll talk about this, there's resistance and change, and it's expensive. So what evidence do you have that this is improving learning? Okay. And one more quote that I want to share. The very definition of what it means to be literate in the 21st century has changed. We need to broaden our evaluation techniques to measure what it means to be literate in a digital age. So a lot of times my work is with the school board or the leadership, in helping people understand this. When we talk about evaluation, maybe test scores are a part of it, but oftentimes there are multiple measures that go beyond test scores that maybe get more at 21st century skills, or the things that aren't measured on a test, or that are difficult to gather, that are too granular in a test once a year environment. And so having some of the multiple tools can help you gather that data and the evidence and the support you need. And Kirsten's going to show some of the tools that they're using and how they were developed. As I got to know the district, they had already done, prior to the one-to-one implementation, some professional development around the SAMR model. And I think most people are familiar with the SAMR model. It's a really nice, easy graphic that's easy for people to understand and to have a common language and to talk about their practice. So at the bottom is substitution, and that's where you would just be substituting what you already do. What we really want to get to is redefinition, or sometimes I call it transformation. And that's where we can do things with technology for learning that we could not have done if it would not be possible without the technology. While I like the SAMR model, one of the problems that I think about it is it's kind of vague. You know, and sometimes it's hard to say, well, what would transformation really look like in my classroom, and to localize that. I also think that the evaluation has to come from the district goals, what their learning initiatives are. And one of the nice things about Cedarburg is they had a very visionary superintendent who had been through a one-to-one before. That helped, and the emphasis was really on 21st century skills. In fact, if I had to wrap it all up, what their number one thing was we want to graduate resilient problem solvers. And I thought that was really cool. But then how do we measure that, and how do we report that back to the school board if we're making progress on that? So we had several meetings, and Kirsten will talk about the process a little bit more in depth. And what we did is we kind of rewrote our own SAMR model. And I think this is a great idea, maybe something you want to do around your district. And after kind of some stakeholder meetings, we came up with 4 areas that were really important that we wanted to measure. So we were looking at problem solving, authentic learning environments, knowledge creators, and lifelong learners. And in the presentation, and we'll share the link at the end too, where you can get it, we defined, and we won't read all of these, but you can go online and read them, what that would mean for each thing in depth. So we said, what if we were to walk into a classroom, what would redefinition for problem solving look like? What would modification look like? What would augmentation look like? And what would substitution look like? And we refined that and worked through it, and we did that for each of the 4 things. Now we have a common language of what we wanted as a result of this. And I really commend the district because they did this before the Chromebooks arrived. So everybody had a common vision of, this is why we're getting the Chromebooks. These are the things that we want to graduate with our students. This is what we can do with technology that we couldn't do as well before. Okay, and I'm going to give it back to Kirsten.
Sorry, noisy lapel mic. So our process Tammy described a little bit, but we joke a lot because if you saw my slide with the fall 2012, fall 2013, fall 2014, I look back and I say, how the heck did we get there? And sometimes I would talk, and I'll tell a little more about the process, and I'd say, you know what? This whole thing right now makes me so nervous because this is like a snowflake in the air. And coming soon, we're going to have an avalanche and we need to be prepared. Like, this is coming. How are we going to do this? And so I just wanted to share a little something to kind of describe how we were feeling at the time and what our process
Some people like to climb
looked like.
mountains. I like to build planes in the air.
I grew up wanting to be on a wing, wanting to be up this high.
Sometimes the temperature up at altitude will reach 60 below. It's brisk, it's refreshing.
You never know what you're going to come across up here. Canadian geese, mallards.
Owls.
These people back here, that's why I come to work. That's why I build airplanes in the sky.
We're not just building a plane here. We're building a dream.
I love this job.
I get a lot of thanks up here. When I look over there and I see that little kid, and I look in his eyes, that's all the thanks I need.
EDS, managing the complexities of the digital economy.
So in all seriousness, sometimes I felt like, oh my gosh, we're doing this, and we know what we're doing, and we think we know where we're going, but do we really? I can't get to my present mode, sorry. So a little more about our timelining. We got our new superintendent in 2013 in July and had that conversation. He said, tell me what we're doing with mobile devices. Where do you think that should go? And what are your philosophies? And so we had this great conversation. I'm like, this guy's awesome. Like, he gets it. He so gets it. And not thinking, oh my gosh, one-to-one, really, what would that look like? And where would the money come from? And yeah, really? So October, when we're presenting our budget and final budget at the board meeting the week before, my business director says, so here's a dollar amount. Could you do it with this? I'm like, are you kidding me? Oh my gosh. Well, of course I could do it with that. Oh my gosh, I think I might have just sold my job away. I don't know if I can do it with that. I don't even know. And October 27th, the board said, yep, here's the money. Go do it. Came back in December and said, here's our plan. Here's what we're thinking. Here's where we're going. And bought the first, they gave us seed money and bought the first set of devices last spring. Got them into a cart model in the classroom, which we had been doing previously. And this year in September, we went one-to-one take home with our 5th and 6th graders. So it was a really fast track from just a snowflake in the air to this avalanche of craziness, which is just awesome with our kids and our teachers and how things have changed. So we didn't get there. We got there intentionally, though. We had a lot of work in our mission and took it very seriously. And the year before had really adopted a vision for technology and why we do technology. And it wasn't to plan for a one-to-one. It was very serendipitous that we had done this previous work. It was like things were set up so nicely that, wow, aren't we good? No, we didn't plan for that. So one of the first things we did is we kind of branded our initiative as a learning initiative and said, what is this? We really want to empower our students and empower our teachers. And why do we do this? And then looking at, well, what does that mean? And what do we have to pay attention to? And what do we really want? We want digital age teaching and learning environments. Our superintendent said, I don't want this to be a one-to-one. This is a learning initiative. And when we talk about devices, we talk about students having a designated device. It's there, designated for their use when it's appropriate and when they need it. We don't want to talk one-to-one because then you're always talking about, oh, it's about the devices. We also really looked at and said, you know what, it's really about access to resources, high quality resources. If you have devices, what are you going to do with them and where are you going to go and what's the content and really, what are kids going to do with that? We are also 2 years into being a Google Apps for Education school, so that kind of made sense too. And then also a big deal for our teachers and for our students is access to data to really inform our decisions. And so those were some of the focus items that we were looking at. So we're so fortunate to have an existing relationship with Tammy, Dr. Stevens at eClass for Learning, and we worked with her and brought her in and said, we're going to need help. And what do we do? Are we on the right page? And so Tammy described that process to you, but we started with initial readiness survey and interview and move forward, and we had a final document by June 9th. And I have a little asterisk here in my presentation because Rachel, we had hired Rachel, our technology integrator administrator, by that time, and we're able to bring her in on board by that June 9th to say, we want you in this process. And so we were moving pretty quickly. So this is a tough slide to see, but this was our beginning plans. Like, okay, our superintendent says, 5th grade. 5th grade's the right grade. I'm like, okay, why? Okay. You know, you'd say some things like, this is what I'd like. And he said, you know what? 5th graders, they're still self-contained. They got to learn the ropes. They're good. We'll move them on to middle school the next year. Okay, we start in 5th grade. What does that look like? But then we talked about the fact that this is a K-12 initiative. It's just not about 5th and 6th grade eventually having one-to-one devices. So then we mapped out a bigger plan and said, you know what, we're going to be adding devices in kindergarten and working with those teachers and ramping that up, adding more devices in 3rd and 4th grade. And then high school. Our high school is transitioning to a block schedule this year with a resource period. That whole transition for them is huge. And teachers planning for that style of instruction and having access to devices, we continually add more and more devices. What we know is that kids who have been one-to-one since 5th grade are coming to them in 3 more years, and we're going to plan for that. So Tammy talked about writing those goals in that process. These are the redefinition levels that we talk with our teachers to say, in 3 years' time, we want to see students who are at that redefinition level of problem solving. What does that look like? And so we write out these descriptors and we go back and we look at them often. We pull them out when we do lesson planning and say, oh, are we moving toward this? Does this make sense? Have we done anything to move forward as our kids being knowledge creators and their lifelong learning skills? Have we done anything there? So we say that's where we're going. But how do you know when you get there? How do you know if you're there? So the evaluation and protocols are important, and it was very helpful working with Tammy. She really helped us design some tools and work through that process. I don't think we could have done that on our own. So Tammy created and helped us create from our SAMR model a lesson survey, items that, and walkthrough and peer reviews, things that we would see in the classroom that would move us towards creating those problem solvers and those knowledge creators and those lifelong learners in the way that we wanted to. So we have a lesson survey. Teachers, we pull data from them. We ask them to pick a day, pick a lesson, go through your lesson, take this survey. Are students asked to solve a problem? Check. Are they asked to analyze critical information that they've gathered? Check. And so we go through and we gather that information on lessons, and we're doing that periodically 3 times a year. It's the same information that we pull on a walkthrough, and then it's also as a peer review, they collect the same information. So then we take the data and throw it in a chart and start looking at what does the change over time look like. We haven't had much, we're winter right now, so we're getting there. It's going to be exciting to see if we do see change. The other thing that we do for our data collection is student interviews, having those candid conversations with kids. I have a 5th grader. When this was all planning, it was like, 5th grade. Wow, my kid's going to be in that. Oh, that's so cool. I'm so excited. It's so eye-opening to have that as a parent, to have that lens. It's really a neat experience in having the conversations with my student. The other thing that we've done, which I also feel was kind of an interesting process and real fortunate that it happened this way, is districts in our area had begun working with Bright Bites in their Clarity survey. And I'd heard about it, and people would talk about it, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know, what's that, whatever. I hadn't really engaged in it. And last year at ISTE, I met with Dr. Kristen Swanson. I'm like, hey, this is what we're doing. Tell me more. Everybody's talking about Bright Bites here. And she's like, oh, I think it might be a really good thing for you. So this was another piece of data collection that we are doing in our district. It's a parent, student, and staff survey. And we took the survey results. We have done a fall survey. We'll do a spring one also. And then mapped the questions that are in the Bright Bites survey and the results back to our Cedarburg SAMR model. So we say we want to develop problem solvers. What data can we track in that Bright Bites survey to inform us if we're getting there yet? And so I pulled a few pieces of our data just so you can see the things that we're going to be tracking using Bright Bites. And here's our authentic learning environments. This one's a pretty direct correlation here. And what you can see here, it's really nice in the Bright Bites data that we get back. We can look at our own data by school, by district, compare it to Wisconsin schools, compare it to all schools that take the Bright Bites survey, the case survey. So that's another piece that we're actually working with in pulling our data and saying, are we there yet? So here's a few more pieces. And then the other one that's been interesting, and Rachel will talk a little bit about it, is there were some things in that survey that was like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Do you see the little red down there? Digital citizenship skills, 22%. And we hadn't had our data conference yet with Bright Bites, and they're like, Rachel and I were like appalled. Oh my gosh, we're failing, we're just failing. Our kids don't have digital citizenship skills, we have to figure something out. And Bright Bites was like, oh my gosh, your scores are so good. It's like, oh, okay, I don't feel so bad, but it's awful still. So we have work to do. So we say that that's where we want to go, and we're tracking it, and we're evaluating if we're getting there, but what are we doing to get there? That is the huge piece of trying to move forward. If we don't do things to get there, how are we going to get there? And so piece of that is really having Rachel on our staff. So Rachel's going to talk a little bit about how do we get there and what we're doing with our teachers.
Thanks. I was thinking as we were preparing that I get to tell you this is the real truth. Like, that's my section. This is what's really going on. These were all of our plans, and now I'm going to tell you how it's really working out. So one of the things that we haven't yet mentioned is the Noster model for complex change. And if you've not already seen it, the very top row talks about all of the things that you need, and if you get all of those things in line, you'll see they end with success, and that's what we were after. So we shared this with the staff, we've shared this with the administration, we've shared this with anybody who will listen, really, saying, when we talk to you about our vision, when we talk to you about all of the skills and the incentives and the action plan and all of those things, and we keep bringing that around, regardless of whatever level you're at, it's because we want you to be aware, and we don't want to end up with some of the bottom purple blocks there, things like resistance and confusion and anxiety and all of those things. And I think we've all been a part of some kind of large complex change that has ended in that result. So we've been very purposeful, and in a lot of the training I do, I start out with this, and I say, hey, remember this? We're really trying to avoid that. So we wanted to make sure we shared that with you, because we're going to come back around to this, so remember this, because when I talk about our results, I'm going to share with you where we're coming back to this model to look at how things are working out for us. When we looked at professional development and the needs that we had for our teachers, we started to realize that really, and like Kirsten said, it's not just our 5th and 6th grade teachers, it's across the district. And we really needed to look at the model that we were offering our teachers. And if you've ever been a part of professional development that happens at the end of the school year, so you pack up your classroom and you're all done and you send all those kids home, and then the teachers stay for 1, 2, 3 or more days, right? And you're supposed to be really, really excited to be there, and you're supposed to take in all that knowledge, but what you really want is that break. And that's what we have in our current schedule in Cedarburg. We have 2 days at the end, actually 3 days at the end. And we looked at those and we said, oh, planning that is just so challenging. And nobody really has their heart in it. And no matter what song and dance we do for PD for those teachers at that time, we're not going to meet the need that they have, because their need is really not to be with us. So we looked at that and we said, okay, if we believe these bulleted points up here about really solid professional learning for our teachers, if we really believe that, how can we change the way that looks? And so what we did was we offered them this year as a pilot, and we are now evaluating it, a very different professional development model that we are kind of terming now Flex PD. So we said, if you are interested in not coming on those 2 days, if you're interested in that and you value professional learning that is right there all the time when you need it, by choice, the things that you're interested in, the things that fit for you, what would happen if you went and did that either on your own or through professional learning that we offer you? So we put together a professional learning catalog of things that we knew teachers needed, and I know you can't read all these things, but we put that all together and we said those days at the end would be 13 hours of time. How about you put in 13 hours of time documented between now and the end of the school year, and then you don't need to come. And if you were planning on coming on those days, don't worry, we'll still get great stuff for you on those days, but here's an incentive to do that. A couple of really good things came out of it. Number one, that course that's kind of in the middle, that's the course that we developed for all of our teachers going into the one-to-one. So it does things like talks about technology integration best practice, digital tools and resources, assessment in the mobile classroom, all of those things that we knew those teachers that were entering into a one-to-one would need. Now they got credit for it, and it wasn't an additional time over the summer or evenings that they were required to do. So remember that Noster model, there was that incentive piece for them as well. Additionally, we learned that a lot of our teachers are doing things that we don't know anything about. They're going out, they're seeking out great things. We were able to give them credit for that, which we hadn't anticipated before. And those are just like a few of the things that we discovered from that. Additionally, it's also given us some great record keeping and resources in regards to our evaluation model, where we can look at what are teachers doing to enhance their craft just on their own. So lots of really good things have come out of that. We have focused all of those teachers, after they go through all of that professional development for the one-to-one, the last thing we work with them is on, if you're gonna really do all this, if you're gonna really change this, if you're really gonna look at how you teach a little bit differently, you're gonna need to change the way that you develop a unit for your classroom. So we used information from the Buck Institute, and that's actually linked here, so if you wanna go out and find more information from there. But at the top link is a unit lesson design that we took all of our teachers in the one-to-one through. So the goal is go into where our curriculum lives, pull down a unit you've got, and now you know about the Cedarburg SAMR, you know about the ISTE standards. You take all of those things and plug them in. So our teachers are now doing work with all of those goals that Tammy helped us to build, to redesign their lessons. Not saying you have to rewrite a unit, but you're rewriting the unit, including those pieces that maybe you didn't know about when you designed it 2 or 3 years ago. So that's been a big part of our work with the teachers. So the Cedarburg SAMR, those goals, this document that we shared with you earlier, that's actually linked right within what we're doing. So if I go into that design template, that's linked over here. So we keep coming back around with it. We're not going away. We really are serious. We really are going to assess this. We really are going to determine that, that things are changing for that. And we really believe in that. And so we've made it a big piece of what we're doing. Again, I would invite you to look at all of the information out on at the Buck Institute, and Tammy also could speak to that later because I know she's done some work there. She was mentioning that earlier today too. So all of these pieces, these bulleted pieces, are included in that focused unit design. So we're not just giving out devices, we're not just saying here it is, now you got your training, now you figure it out. We're doing that, and that's where I come in and sit down with teachers and really hash it out and look at that. So in all of that, we've had some interesting insights, And Kirsten can attest to that. One of the big ones is, as we talked about the SAMR model, and we keep bringing around the SAMR model again, we've decided that maybe there's another level. And actually, we should probably at some point share that with the creator of the SAMR model. But at any rate, I don't know if the graphic is big enough. It shows a cat on a surfboard in the pool, and it's a substitution level. So sometimes as we work through those unit designs and teachers tell us what they're intending to do, we have to stop and say, why? And they say, well, because, you know, like I've got technology, I want to use it. And we say, is it really the best way to get about what you have, or that, you know, what you're trying to do? And it's kind of like a level of substitution at which the technology use deteriorates the idea that you were trying to get at within the lesson. So I don't know if you've had that experience. My example would be, and this is probably the best example we've been thinking about. We've been racking our brain for different ones, but this one comes to the top. If you remember DOL, daily oral language, so years ago we used to write 2 sentences on the board, and they had spelling and punctuation and all sorts of errors in it, and the kids would come in while you were getting ready and taking attendance, and they would rewrite the sentences in their notebooks. And they would correct things, and you would say, who's got the correct sentence, and why did you change this, and so on and so forth. So take DOL and make it digital. And what would you do? Well, you type the sentence, and then the computer corrects half of the incorrect things, right? So actually, we've had a teacher that has then gone through and changed that and said, well, they're going to change anything where they had to capitalize. They're going to change the color to red. And then they're going to change all the verb and subject agreement to green. And then they're going to change. So now you're going to all this work to do something. And the big question becomes, why? Why would you do that? So the use of technology did not in any way help that process happen. It probably hindered it. And there was probably a better way to go about it to actually get back up to the SAMR model, right? Some of those more authentic learning environment types of activities. So we are really kind of now on the lookout for that substitution level, because we think it's really there and it's happening a lot. And we've had many situations where, you know, oh, we're going to make QR codes and we're going to post them in the hallway. And we say, who's scanning those? Oh, we don't know. Well, why wouldn't you share it in a different way so that people can actually go get it? Oh, you know, so using a QR code just because the QR code is cool, in spite of the fact that nobody has the ability to scan them in the middle school. So some of those questions come up and they bring us back around to this. Another thing that we've found recently, and more recently again, back and forth, is resistance, and in some cases persistence. So when we look at resistance, and I'll jump back over to this slide, that's one of those purple blocks. So if you go down to the third from the bottom, if you're missing an incentive, you will find resistance. So anytime we come back from a training, we come back from something working with the teachers and, gosh, they were so resistant, that's a buzzword to say, wait a minute, we're missing something. There was not enough incentive. We did not acknowledge something there. We did not make it worthwhile in that sense. They didn't feel incentivized. So as we explore some of that, we're coming back around and saying, all right, so what do we need to do and how do we need to get there? So how can we change resistance into persistence? And that's one of the things that we're struggling with. How can we add that incentive? How can we change that? And we do have some teachers that have just been persistent all along. It's just their perception of what it is. And yeah, right, everybody's perception is their own version of reality, right? So we have to acknowledge that. The other thing that we've come across is screen time. So we've had some parents say, talk to me about screen time. How much of the day is my kid going to be in front of that computer? And then the teachers are sending those computers home, and now there's homework with that. And how much screen time is really okay? And that's a great question, and not one that you really think about in a one-to-one when you're all gung-ho about getting those devices in those kids' hands, and all of a sudden the parents are saying, gosh, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that. And that goes back to that substitution level, doesn't it? Because if screen time is too great, then you really have to remove any of the use of that substitution level, or even substitution level, I would argue. You know, if you're not working at that transformational level, it might not be worth the screen time. So those are some of the newer conversations that we're starting to have. And lastly, Kirsten mentioned earlier about digital citizenship. So we're looking at new ways to work with our students to increase digital citizenship. If our high schoolers are low, they're the ones that are on their way out. How can we still catch them? And then how do we make sure that those 5th and 6th graders continue to grow while they're using the device? And that's almost a flying the plane and building it at the same time kind of thing as well. And then who's responsible for that? Who teaches that in their curriculum? That's easy when the kids are with one teacher all the time, but what about when those kids are moving to 4 and 5 or more teachers? Who's the teacher that owns that? So those are some of the things that now we're coming back around. And without the data collection and without all these goals, we would not be there. So we're gonna leave this open for questions, and I'm gonna invite Tammy and Kirsten back up and let them speak and make sure that I didn't miss anything. I don't know. But we want to offer you some time to ask us questions, get information. If I jump back around, I can get the tiny URL. Is that our URL? Okay. So the tinyurl.com/Cedarburg ICE. That's the link to the presentation, and all of those links should be open. If they're not, please let me know. If there was any that we missed, we did try and check them. You're welcome to contact any of the 3 of us about any of this, and we will be here for questions as well. Anything you guys want to share? Okay, so thank you. Anybody have any questions? It's really hard to see. I'm sorry. I think the spotlight. Yeah. So the question was, since September, what kind of PD are we doing now? Yeah. So if I were to back up, and whoops, went too far here. Try that one more time. This website that's linked here, in this professional learning catalog, there is a list of all the evening offerings that we're having, and they do happen outside of school. But additionally, this section under Empower Learning Initiative modules, those are outlined here for specifically those going into the one-to-one. Some of the sessions in here at the end, more specifically, were things that we added based on things that people requested. We also gave people the opportunity in our forms section to submit that they desired something, or even that they wanted to lead something themselves. So certainly we are not the end-all, be-all, knowledgeable people in the district. There's lots of people that had lots of opportunities, so we added things that we kind of came across that people really needed. So people came up and said things. Interestingly enough, somebody just recently requested that we give them a sandbox time within that. So I've been to like 3 of your things, Rachel, and they're great and I love it, but then I kind of feel like I want time to really implement what you've showed me and work with it more, but I'm afraid to do it by myself. And if you had a sandbox time that you would hold while you're there, where you could go, or like, for instance, a Google site thing that we've done, hey, I want to build this Google site, but I know that I'm going to get 10 minutes in and I'm going to have 3 questions. So can we have a time to do that? And so we're trying to be really responsive to those requests because they are very specific. This is the PD I need. So it's an ever-changing document, and we're trying to also add the community things, like an ed camp came up. We added that in. That's a great experience for all of them. So if you go to ed camp, we're all good with that too. So. other questions? Okay. Yeah. Oh, I can put that up. First slide is, yep. Okay. Yeah. Oops, my apologies. I had it there for 1 second. I hope you saw it. No, I'm kidding. Okay, at the bottom. That should link you out there. And we did submit it for the session resources, so if it's not there, it will be soon. Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.